Uber told drivers they could be their own boss and earn $35 an hour. Studies show the average driver earns less than minimum wage after costs and has no sick pay, no pension, and no job security. Welcome to the future of work. Here's what the gig economy actually looks like at scale. Over 70 million Americans participated in it in 2025. That's roughly 36% of the entire U.S. workforce, and 55% of them rely on gig work for more than half their total income. This is not a side hustle for most of these people. This is their job. 88% of gig workers say they took on more platform work specifically because of inflation and rising living costs. 38% of new 2025 freelancers were previously laid off. They didn't choose the gig economy so much as they fell into it when nothing else was there. Goldman Sachs estimated that gig workers earn only 50 to 65% as much per hour as they made in their previous traditional jobs. So before we get into how this system works, understand who we're actually talking about. Not college students picking up extra shifts between classes. Millions of people who needed a job, heard the pitch, and are now living inside a business model deliberately designed to pay them as little as legally possible. Uber advertises up to $35 an hour. DoorDash promises you can earn on your own schedule. Fiverr sells freedom and entrepreneurship. These aren't technically lies. Their best-case ceiling numbers the equivalent of a casino advertising its biggest jackpot. Here's what the actual numbers look like. The IRS sets the standard mileage rate, what it genuinely costs to operate a vehicle, at 72.5 cents per mile. Full-time delivery drivers typically log 20 to 30,000 miles per year. That's $14,500 to $21,750 in vehicle operating costs alone, before insurance, before taxes. And on top of that, gig workers pay the full 15.3% self-employment tax, the half that a traditional employer would normally cover for you. Run those numbers through a 2024 UC Berkeley Labor Center study analyzing over 52,000 trips across Los Angeles, San Francisco, Boston, Chicago, and Seattle, and you get this. Most gig drivers make significantly less than minimum wage once all real costs are factored in. The platform-by-platform picture from 2025 data is even blunter. After expenses, DoorDash drivers net somewhere between $7 and $9 an hour. DoorDash had an average gross hourly pay of $11, the lowest of all 19 platforms analyzed. Uber ride drivers come in at roughly $14 to $17 after costs. Uber pulled in $43.9 billion in revenue in 2024. Net income, $9.8 billion. Their drivers are netting $14 an hour. But this wasn't even the most revealing part. The entire gig economy business model balances on a single legal classification, independent contractor. By calling workers contractors instead of employees, platforms avoid paying minimum wage guarantees, employer-side Social Security and Medicare taxes, health insurance contributions, workers' compensation for injuries, unemployment insurance, paid sick leave, retirement plan contributions, and overtime. For a worker earning $30,000 a year, the value of those missing benefits is estimated at $12, $0 to $18,000 annually. It's a hidden pay cut that never appears on any job listing. The platforms call this flexibility. The New York State Bar Association, in a 2025 analysis, called it something else. Control has not disappeared, it has been digitized and disguised. An Uber driver, they found, has more behavioral control exercised over them than many traditional employees. It's just exercised by algorithm rather than by a manager. Drop below a 4.6 star rating on Uber? Automatic deactivation. No appeal. No explanation. 91% of gig workers report being deactivated, penalized, or shadow banned at least once without being told why. That's not freedom. That's at-will termination with even fewer due process rights than a regular job. So when the pitch says be your own boss, what they mean is you own the car, You pay the fuel, you absorb the depreciation, you handle the taxes. We own the app, the customer relationship, and the pricing. You get the risk. We capture the upside. In 2019, California passed AB 5, a law that would have reclassified most gig workers as employees, requiring Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, and Instacart to provide minimum wage guarantees, benefits, and workers' compensation. The platform's response? Spend their way out of it. DoorDash, Lyft, Uber, and Instacart collectively spent over $200 million to fund Proposition 22, a ballot initiative written to exempt them from AB 5. Labor unions spent about $20 million to oppose it, a 10-to-1 money advantage. Proposition 22 passed in November 2020 with 58% of the vote, becoming the most expensive ballot measure in California history at that point. Stanford law professor William Gould, former chairman of the National Labor Relations Board, called it an enormous setback for workers who are marginalized, adding that the company showed this is the way to repeal what the legislature does, using an expensive, well-financed campaign to deny worker rights. After the win, Uber's CEO publicly stated the company would more loudly advocate for laws like Prop 22 globally. They meant it. Alabama, Tennessee, and Utah have since passed similar portable benefits laws. DoorDash, Instacart, and Uber lobbied directly for a version in Wisconsin which Governor Tony Evers vetoed in 2025, saying it locked drivers into independent contractor status without guaranteeing benefits in return. The playbook is now national. Seattle tried something in 2024. The city enacted a minimum pay of $26.40 per hour for delivery drivers. It was one of the most ambitious gig worker protections in the country. The platform's response was immediate and coordinated. DoorDash imposed a $4.99 fee on all Seattle orders. Uber Eats added similar surcharges. Customers soon faced bills where nearly 30% of what they paid had nothing to do with the food. DoorDash spent $130,000 on lobbying in March 2024 alone to get the ordinance repealed, while simultaneously reporting $371 million in adjusted EBITDA that same quarter and claiming it couldn't absorb the cost increase. When Seattle released its first official government report in April 2026, using data from all 5 major delivery platforms, covering every worker and every offer across 18 months, the results directly contradicted the industry's narrative. Average pay had risen from around $3.17 per hour before the ordinance to $15.98 per hour. Weekly completed orders had grown 3.2%. The sky had not fallen. The lesson from Seattle and from New York City, which doubled down on its own minimum wage law in October 2025 rather than retreat, is that when platforms control the early narrative, they can make any regulation look like a catastrophe. Add fees, throttle orders, manipulate tip prompts, then blame regulators for the outcomes they engineered. A person who spends 20 years as a gig driver will retire with no employer match, no pension, and often no consistent income from which to save. The American Academy of Actuaries confirmed in 2025 that gig workers are far less likely to have saved for retirement than traditional employees of similar age and income. Texas alone lost over $111 million in potential unemployment insurance contributions between 2020 and 2022 because gig workers aren't classified as employees. Multiply that across 50 states and 15 years of growth, and the contractor model represents an enormous unreported public subsidy directly to platform shareholders. DoorDash's gross margin expanded from 44.5% to 48.7% between 2023 and 2025, meaning the platform captured a growing share of every dollar customers spent, while driver pay grew at a fraction of that rate. The gig economy was sold as liberation, be your own boss, set your own hours, earn what you're worth. What it actually built was a labor system with all the control of employment and none of the protections. The boss is still there. They just moved into the algorithm.